Why narcissists reinvent themselves. Welcome to today's topic, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Coach Tobias Forst, founder of Achilles-Lifecoaching, decade-long recipient of narcissistic abuse, and have saved myself from it. And I will support you on your journey to your personal freedom. So, you're experiencing the following you're making a very, what seems to be a curious observation, that the narcissist has left his place of work for a completely different area of work, a completely different field. So the one setting A, now former setting A, seems to have nothing in common with setting B, because he now engages in a type of work that he was very negative toward half a year ago, and now it seems to be the bestest ever. So, and he's all in favor of it, and he has changed many more things: circle of friends, new intimate partner, new hobbies, and it's like you're observing this and thinking, what's going on here? It seems like a show. The curtains parted, and here's the grand performer, the protagonist, as he sees himself or herself. You can interchange he with she as you like. And you're thinking, what's happening here? He seems to be a completely different person. Completely changed his attire, his behavior, the people he hangs out with, the work he does. So there's a reason for this. There's a certain urge within every narcissist, something they simply must do. And what it is that they must do is acquire supply. In contrast to a borderline, a narcissist goes out having constructed and having been replaced by what is called the false self. You can imagine the false self as a false god that is very thin, a very thin, papery assortment of paintings. This is how he presents himself, and this is how you have to agree what he is. Because here's the painting, here's the next, here's the next, here's the next. It's like a multiplicity of screens displaying as he sees himself, as he wants to be seen, and you are to agree with that. That is the false self. Behind it, there's really no one. There was a small child once, but it's long since passed away behind that facade. The narcissist doesn't really have the false self. He is the false self by now. And he has been for probably decades. So the urge, that which he must do, the sine qua non, that without which not, the essential ingredient of a narcissist's life is acquiring supply, acquiring narcissistic supply, admiration, adulation, being agreed with, being pedestalized, being seen as the greatest, smartest, most handsome, most beautiful, most gifted, most capable, blah, blah, blah. Because it's on the screens. He shows you, he tells you. Don't mind him not acting according to this. He tells you. And it's tell, don't show, in a bad movie at least. This is what he tells you. This is what you have to, according to him, agree with. So he deserves that adulation. He deserves the supply. Why change jobs? Why change circle of friends? Why change intimate partner then? There will be one reason that we will discuss today why they reinvent themselves, or seem to reinvent themselves. There must have been a reason, an impetus to change. That is the first. It wasn't his choice, although he constructs it for himself in his mind, that after the fact, of course it was his choice, but it wasn't. To change something. And you might perceive your observation is he did A 2 weeks ago, now he's in situation, setting, job B. That doesn't really seem coherent, and you're observing the symptoms. You're observing the screens, the MO, the modus operandi, the way to act, the behavior behind it is the same, and it will always be the same. Whether he's in real estate or martial arts or politics or whatever. There must have been a reason to acquire new supply sources and better supply sources, and a different field wherein to acquire those sources of seeming higher quality. And why is that? Let's dig deeper at this very point. Why is that? People started to see through him, to see past the screens, see that the lights are on and the elevator goes up, but there's no one really in there. And within a few days or weeks, maybe the primary source of supply, which is usually the intimate partner, discarded him, saw through him, liberated herself, ran away, as she smartly did. Maybe in addition to that, secondary sources of supply like you, being in the closest circle of friends, started packing. More people saw through him. You and the rest of the circle of friends, or most of them, finally saw through him. And that led to him losing important sources of primary and secondary supply, and the quality of supply rapidly diminished. This is like if you tried to choke yourself, diminishing your oxygen intake. You would fight it tooth and nail because you need oxygen to survive. A narcissist also, in addition to oxygen, of course, requires supply in order to simply live. The false self, this false God, depends its entire existence. It depends on people believing the lies. It is, in the literal sense, vital to receive supply. And now she broke away, you broke away, a few other friends, important friends broke away. And what remains for him is scorched earth. Of course he cannot accept that he is what he is. It must be the fault of all of you. You must have been low-quality friends that he believed in, but you just didn't fulfill your potential. He will construct it after the fact again, that it was his choice to distance himself from her and from you and your other friends, because you just didn't make the cut despite all his efforts. Must be you, not him. So what follows is, regardless of the fantasy constructions in his mind, reality, yet again, beat the fantasy. Reality destroyed the fantasy. I often call reality the sister of death, because reality, those siblings, reality and death, they have several things in common. They cannot be lied to, they cannot be gaslit, they cannot be manipulated. They cannot be bargained with. They check the fantasy. They check the grandiosity of the narcissist. Death does it once, final. Reality does it every minute of every day, for the entirety of his life. So let's dig more deeply at this point. When reality beats fantasy, the fantasy that he tries to lure you, or has tried to lure you, his ex-girl, now ex-girlfriend, and the rest of your circle of friends, into in order to see how I am, see what I am, believe me. He tried to lure you into that. It worked for a time until it didn't. Reality beat fantasy. Now what happens? What happened? There were at least several, to varying degrees, narcissistic injuries that took place for him. In addition to that, it is not uncommon, it is likely that also some degree of narcissistic collapse happened, depending on how you and your circle of friends, or if you were the intimate partner, breaking away, how that happened. If it happened in an antagonistic and unexpected way in front of significant others toward him, like you breaking up in front of other people, or the circle of friends cutting ties within hours with him, or during the same meeting together, then this is very likely to lead to narcissistic collapse. Or some quality stage of it, some degree of it. Regardless of how it goes, you as a source of supply just went from X to 0, as did he, and he, and he, and she as the intimate ex-partner now. But he needs supply. So it is time for action, at least once he recovered from narcissistic injuries and narcissistic collapse, if there was any. What are those possible actions? There will be an analysis, a subconscious analysis regarding his energy input into what exactly. The goal is the return on investment has to be supply. So there will be a thought process about how much energy should go, for example, into a smear campaign in order to convince several of you that you were wrong about him, maybe sowing discontent and confusion among you, maybe getting the ex back just to drop her at a later point in life and discard her on his terms. How much energy, how much investment does he have to invest in the old group, members of the old group like you? And what return can be expected? And if, like in a business model, if that is the investment and this is the return, it's simply not feasible. So he goes elsewhere. He changes from, as discussed earlier in this video, he changes from setting A to setting B. That said, let's say he opts for a complete change of course. New job, new friends, soon new girlfriend, primary supply source, new secondary supply sources, new colleagues, a complete change. This is what you observed and deemed as being curious. Like, doesn't seem to have to do anything with one another. It has everything to do with one another. The goal is always supply. And he needed to change the course, the setting, the players he sits at the table with, who will have to be less experienced than you. You've woken up, they haven't. So it will be not only dealing new cards, it will be a new card deck metaphorically, and it will certainly be a new table, and most certainly new players. So to conclude, ladies and gentlemen, don't be surprised. Regardless of how the chassis is painted, the motor is still the very same as it was before, and before, and before that. Also, when you feel the urge of warning somebody in this new setting B that he's in now, don't. Be grateful. Be grateful that somebody else, unknowingly in most cases, took on the burden of dealing with this narcissist. Because he's no longer your burden. But also try to not lie when you're asked. Somebody asks you, this new colleague, I know that you've had dealings in the past, and for me there's something seems to be off about her. Can you tell me a bit about her? Follow your gut feeling when you hear such an inquiry. Is it maybe a flying monkey, an enabler, trying to get knowledge out of you, trying to trap you into some statement? Or is it just someone who also has a certain degree of knowledge about narcissism, follows his gut feeling and asking you? Take your time, you have no obligation to answer to any extent or at all. Rely on your gut feeling, listen to it and act accordingly. So keep your eyes peeled and your ears to the ground. Take your time and listen to your gut feeling, ladies and gentlemen, because it could simply just be somebody changing the place of work from A to B for all other reasons than being a narcissist, or it could be a narcissist. Take your time, rely on what you've learned, do the homework, study the markers of what makes a narcissist, and guard what you tell other people, especially when you don't really know them yet, regardless of how much they share with you. You have no obligation to share your innermost feelings, thoughts, values, and secrets within the first 4 weeks of knowing someone. So, stay in logical thinking, don't let them bait you into emotional thinking, and be your own hero, be your own heroine. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.